Boom. Hey, you're live on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. I am Teddy. My sidekick with the shiny forehead is Randy. Our special guest today is Tyler Wiersma. We'll introduce you to him momentarily. Lunch Conversations is brought to you by Teddy and Randy.
There you go.
As we are seeking another sponsor to help us take your show to a whole nother level. For those who've never met me or heard of me, let me see, how many we got here, Randy? You got about 10,000 people in the audience, and as it's growing and more showing up. For those that don't know me, I run a company called Burriss Consulting. We're social media strategists focused on teaching LinkedIn as a business tool to individuals across the globe. We do one-on-one coaching, corporate training programs with keynote speeches, workshops, seminars. And as some of you know, I will stand on any street corner and proselytize, I think I'm using the right word, the power of LinkedIn as a business tool. Randy, I should probably Google that one day and make sure it's the right word, you think?
Yeah, but you have to be able to spell it first, and that's a toughie.
Oh, yeah, I got Bard. I asked Bard to help me. So, hey, Randy, are we up and running live?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I think we're all set on LinkedIn and Facebook. So I'll do a brief intro of myself, throw it back to you, and take it from there.
All right,
Randy Wooden with the blue shirt today. Teddy, is that purple? My eyes,
purple, man. And look, you know me, how I roll. It matches my glasses. And Randy, one step further, no, 2 steps further, matches my glass. And check out my fancy Dan old light in the corner with blue, with purple.
Wow, I
spare no expense of our money, Randy.
Was that in the budget?
No expense spared, buddy.
Okay. Randy Wooden, Goodwill Industries, Northwest North Carolina, director for our professional center. And, interestingly enough, I've had a number of clients over the years who have gone through the UNC, program, whether it's Chapel Hill, whether it's Greensboro and elsewhere. So, not an unfamiliar school here locally, well-known, well-respected. And we'll learn more about that with Tyler here in a bit. But back about Goodwill, if you, or maybe, I don't know, somebody maybe you have a recent graduate, maybe you are a recent grad, or you've got a child has graduated and kind of looking for that first crack at corporate America, you may want to reach out. Again, services are free. We're happy to help, get you on the calendar and get you where you want to go. But every week, Teddy and I get together on Wednesdays for an hour. We learn stuff, as I say, and have a lot of fun along the way. And so today is no exception. Teddy, I'll throw it to you, but just know I'll keep an eye on the chat. Folks, if you've got comments or questions for Tyler, try to work them in as the show goes on. So, Teddy, take it away.
So our special guest today, Tyler Wiersma, 6 years of UNC Greensboro's Bryan School of Business and Economics. Tyler, I often forget that economics part. I know better than that. So why don't you, if you could, introduce yourself to our audience so they have a better idea of who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for the invite to both of you today. I'm not sure how I've made my way onto this illustrious roster of guests, but thank you. And I also appreciate you including my headshot from 5-6 years ago, back when I was in my 20s. It looked very nice on there. So thank you for choosing the right photo. But as you all mentioned, my name is Tyler Wiersma. I'm the manager for undergraduate professional development programs at UNC Greensboro in the Bryan School of Business and Economics. It's a mouthful. Been here 6 years, developed a couple of really cool initiatives over the years, particularly aimed at undergraduate students, the Blueprint series and Bryan Gold, which I know we'll talk about here later today. But my path to get here was winding, much like most people in the world, right? There isn't a straight point A to point B, but grew up in Northeast Ohio. I have a psychology background. I have a business background, psychology background, went to grad school at Kent State, got my master's in higher education. And then, sure enough, went right into higher education after that. Wrong. Went into startup tech instead. Was a project manager for a startup tech company down in Southeast Ohio. And that perfectly set me up to blend my two loves of higher education and technology and that startup atmosphere into where I'm at now. So that's the road that brought me here. And I'm happy to talk more about my experiences here today.
Yeah, cool, Tyler. And I should have coached you a little bit better on your background image. that you're using, unless it's a live view and you're on top of the building there. But that'll confuse our audience. They'll think they're in a morning show instead of a midday show.
Well, Teddy, my response to that is every day I come to work, I feel like I'm on top of the world. So that's why
there you go. Right answer. Right answer. So, Randy wants to know, has a question for you. We start every show with. So, Randy, you want to hit him up?
Well, sure. And you've touched on it some, but I always ask the why question. People are passionate. They're on our show. They're passionate about what they do. And I guess looking back, was there an instance or a series of events that at some point you said, you know what, this is home for me. This is the kind of work that I really, really want to do.
Yeah, well, I will take you all the way back to kindergarten. So I grew up in a household of educators. And not only did I grow up in a household of educators, but my dad was my principal at my elementary school. So I commuted to and from school with the principal every single day. And I absolutely loved it. I loved talking to the teachers, getting to know them. I lived and breathed education, whether I even realized that was a career path for me, right? So, came up all the way through high school, wanting to be a high school teacher, really excited to go and pursue that. And then, my interest changed a little bit. I got to college and I thought, wow, this place is really neat. There's a lot of people who are coming from all walks of life, different size cities and towns, and they're all descending on this area that's incredibly diverse and open to different ways of thinking. And I fell in love with it. And I kind of backed my way into that career. I found where I wanted to be first before I found what I wanted to do within that environment. So that's why I went and got my master's degree in higher education. And it was in that program I took a business and higher education course. And I loved it. I loved working through the scenarios of, how do we maximize our educational process with minimal resources. That's pretty much what the whole class was all about. And then when I went and worked for that startup company, as I mentioned, we built websites for youth sports organizations. It was the CEO, the COO, the CTO, and then me. And I had kind of try reporting to all three of them. So the year and a half I was there, I got a crash course in what it meant to be part of a business. And because I was one of the few lower ranking professionals, I had access to everything. I had insight, there was full transparency. And I said, this is really cool. I never thought I would go into business. And then sure enough, this position opened up at UNCG. And I joke about this all the time. It was a brand new position. And I think there were literally 3 bullet points on the job description. And it was teach the professional development course, run the professional development program, which hadn't been figured out yet, and other duties as assigned. And I said, you know what, let's go ahead and give it a shot. Got here, fell in love, haven't left since. UNCG is a phenomenal place, and we have such an incredible student population. We are the #1 school in social mobility in the state of North Carolina. So we're truly taking students who don't have an upbringing that lends to them inherently being successful in life. They have to work harder than everyone else, right? And having my experiences and being able to bring that into the classroom and helping them make change, not just for them, but for their families too. All about it. It's what fuels me every single day. So that's when I fell in love with it.
Cool.
Great.
Cool.
Appreciate that.
Cool.
Thanks, Tyler. Teddy, take it away. We've got lots of turf to cover today.
And I got to remember that phrase.
Yep.
I got to update that job description. Other duties as assigned. That's what I heard, Tyler. I got to put that in there. So, all right, let's talk about business schools. Business schools, and let's talk a little bit about the curriculum, because you don't just come up with the curriculum and go, this is what we're going to go with. You got to figure out the right way to come up with the right curriculum, especially as the world changes, as demands change, as we hit this freaking thing called COVID. Talk about that a little bit, Tyler, and how you come up with business school curriculum.
Yeah, and my position is solely within undergraduate, but also focus on graduate as well. Kind of talk about both. And with any business school, you're going to have your core courses, right? You're going to have those standard courses that, regardless of what specialty, what major you're pursuing, you need to know the foundations of what it means to be a business professional, right? So you have your accounting classes, you have your information system and supply chain classes, right? You have all of the bare bones essentials before you then specialize where you want to go. Yeah. So at the undergraduate level, a lot of schools, you take kind of those core courses the first 2 years, and then the second 2 years that you're there is when you start to specialize, taking those higher level courses where you're really focusing in on your functional area. At the graduate level, what is really cool about the curriculum there is you essentially get to build your own experience to a certain extent. Yeah, you have your courses that you're required to take, but you have electives that you can kind of cobble together. And a lot of schools set it up to where you can actually specialize in an area and receive a certification within your degree, right? So you could go and you could get an MBA, but within that, you could become certified in or gain a certification in X, because you've taken the right number of electives and the right combination of electives to kind of tack that on to your graduate school experience. So that's what I think is really great about the graduate level is, an MBA, yes, is recognized, but it's not always going to separate you from the other MBAs out there. A certificate might, right? So that's something that you can kind of tack on, and it's upskilling at its finest when you're able to you're already paying the money for your tuition. Why not just throw in a certification with it and kind of kill two birds with one stone while you're going at it?
Yeah, and I kind of wonder too, are there certain certifications now that are more popular and maybe more in demand? What are you seeing? I hate to use the word tea leaves because Teddy will always say he doesn't look at tea. What are the tea leaves showing you with this stuff? What's happening out there in the real world, and how is that reflected in what students are pursuing?
Well, I mean, definitely, we've seen AI just grow exponentially over the years. So the schools that are able to capitalize upon that the most, that's one thing that we're working on here in the Bryan School is how can we infuse more AI into what we're teaching. Analytics is huge, right? Any company, when they're making difficult decisions, you better have the numbers to back up whatever it is you're proposing, whether it's cuts, increases, targeting a new population, trying to get that extra 2% bump in your customer acquisition, whatever the case may be. Analytics is huge. So that's one that is definitely standing out right now. And every person, should at least entertain the thought of pursuing it if they're going to go after it.
Yeah. I get it. And then now I'm just hoping that the AI courses also includes accountability and that kind of stuff in the context of using AI. Instead of just, going a little wild west. So yeah, I get it. I guess also in some degree, speak to this a little bit, Tyler, do the MBA programs or courses, certificates, do they also get influenced by local businesses or regional businesses and some of their needs?
Absolutely. Yes. And again, speaking from my experience here, which is in the Bryan School, one of the big ways that we infuse our local employers is through capstone projects. So a lot of graduate programs, when you get to the end of your experience, much like many people probably experience at the end of their undergraduate experience, you do a capstone course. You actually partner with a real company who has a real life problem that you have to solve. And you get the experience of working with a team to come up with a solution. And you go through the process of discovery, meeting with the business owner and key stakeholders, figuring out what's the issue, how can we approach it. Then you present it to them. And what's great is not only do you gain the experience of going through that, but a lot of our students get hired by those companies because they're like, wow, this is fantastic. Let's go ahead and bring you onto the payroll, right? So that's one of the really neat tangible takeaways. And, we talk all the time about the rising cost of tuition, right? And it's getting crazy. It's getting pretty crazy, to be honest. This is one of the unwritten things that should be on your tuition bill that isn't, right? It's the network that you can build. It's the connections you can create and the doors that it opens based on your experiences.
Yeah. Note to self, follow up on regards to capstone courses. So, and I'm being a little facetious or satirical, but I do want to learn more about how does a business raise their hand and go, I have a capstone project. So I might follow up with you on that one later on, just so I can share with other people. So,
of course.
So, all right. Here's when you and I are talking, we use this phrase, or at least I use this phrase. I said, Tyler, what's a typical business school student look like? So talk about that. What's the makeup, the demographic of a typical business school student?
The typical business student is the typical American person, which is a melting pot, right? I mean, it is truly any type of person from any walk of life, any experience level. The changes that we've seen in accessibility to higher education in recent years has really opened the door for a lot of people to come back and finish their degree after a decade off, right? For someone who went into parenthood right out of college who never pursued their bachelor degree to be able to go after that. There's so many different people who are now taking courses, not just in the business school, but at universities. It's really changed how universities pursue students. 10 years ago, no one touched transfers. No one wanted anyone to transfer into their school. They were fine, right? Now transfers is all you can talk about, right? Non-traditional students, getting them to reactivate, that's all you can talk about, because what's happening is we're approaching what's called the generational cliff, the enrollment cliff, which means at this point in time, we have the least college-going students compared to the last 3-4 decades, because people are having less and less children. It means there are less college-going students coming up. And within that, there are other avenues to be successful other than a 4-year degree, other than a graduate degree, right? So we're kind of battling both of those. And because of that, higher education institutions have really had to rethink who is it we're recruiting and how do we go about getting them. So you are seeing that, it's no longer the 18 to 22-year-olds. That's not the overwhelming majority. It is truly all over.
Yeah.
Hey, Teddy, I wonder, and maybe you'll get to this later too, and that deals with the brick and mortar versus online, and you've got higher cost, obviously, with brick and mortar and in person. Are you seeing an uptick more so in the online learning piece of this thing? And of course, from a cost standpoint, it's got to be cheaper for the student as well, I would think.
Yeah, big time. Online is definitely something that students want, and I think it's really been a challenge for universities to kind of catch up to the demand and figure out how to go about it. Because you have so many different types of students. You have in-state students who are coming to college on campus, but they're taking some online courses. You have in-state students that aren't coming at all. They're taking entirely online courses. So you have a blend of, individual courses that are online and all the way up to 100% online degree completion, to where every single course you are taking at, regardless of if you're in-state or out-state, is online and you never have to step foot on campus. At the graduate program, we actually just unrolled our online MBA 2 years ago, I believe, and it has been wildly successful. We were actually just ranked very recently in terms of online MBAs, which was really cool to see in such a short lifespan so far of that program. But yes, the demand is there. The universities are scrambling to do everything they can to make that more accessible, but we are seeing a huge jump in online education.
Yeah, and also, if I might throw in too, we had a question from Lisa asking about, hey, if I'm a high school student, am I able to take on some classes to get some early college credits? I assume you can.
Before you answer that, Tyler, let me make sure Randy's clear. Lisa did not say she's a high school student.
No, she didn't say she's a high school student. Asking for a friend, but yeah.
So, we have at UNCG and a couple of other institutions in the area, we have what's called early and middle college, where students are essentially taking college level courses and coming into their freshman year. And that's the other thing, there really is no freshman anymore, coming in, bringing in upwards of 10, 20, 30 credits and potentially even starting their first year as a sophomore by credit when they get here. So whether it's going through an earlier middle college or doing AP courses or transferring in credits, that's another thing that universities have made very easy, and they're forming partnerships. You see 4-year institutions forming partnerships with community colleges and making some pathways there, right? Any way that we can get students kind of a leg up before they come in here, universities are working hard at doing. So yes, we see that quite often.
Yeah, it would hold costs down too for the student. If they say they got their what do you call it, requirements or whatever, the basic courses taken care of, and then came to you guys for the finishing work on that.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Yeah, Teddy.
Yeah, I have a now 20-year-old granddaughter who just graduated from UNC Chapel Hill. She went in as a junior. And so I mean, because of that whole process. All right, so let's do this. So business schools, a lot of networking opportunities, a lot of growth, a lot of learning opportunities, but it is also a great place to be found by talent acquisition folks from businesses. Talk a little bit about how business schools are become a venue for businesses to recruit talent.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is your career fair, right? The typical career fair that everyone pictures, either you participate as a student or you participate on the other side of the table as an employer. You're bringing hundreds of employers together, thousands of students into a big room. Everyone's shaking hands, exchanging resumes, doing their elevator pitch, stuff like that. But we are finding that that isn't quite as effective. And I think COVID is, I try not to use COVID as a scapegoat, but it did change some things. And at minimum, it accelerated some trends that were already happening, right? The typical career fairs are not how employers are necessarily engaging anymore. A lot of employers are cutting down on on-campus recruitment budgets. So you don't see as many physically going to campuses anymore. You've seen, in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, they're kind of, a lot of companies that had target schools or preferred schools no longer have those anymore. So they're opening it up online, whether it's informational webinars or just an easier to access application. But what you'll find with most business schools is the fastest and easiest way to get access to the top students is to partner with them. Usually that comes in the form of sponsoring events. We have a couple different sponsorship opportunities in the Bryan School where, depending on what level you come in at, you get various levels of access to students. You get your name and your branding on certain things. You can have classroom visits. You can have what's called company spotlights, where they have like an hour pitch on who their company is, what opportunities are available. That's usually how most employers are finding their way in, because the employers that engage with us the most, we're the ones we talk about the most with our students, because we're trying to create those pipelines. So those partnerships are really starting to form. And in a time when higher ed is struggling with state funding, those are going to become more and more prevalent as time goes on.
Yeah, I got you. So you said, did you say, or you're still doing or not doing the career fairs anymore?
We are still doing it. Yeah. So career fairs are going to be kind of your staple, but
not the main channel. I get it.
Yeah. And if employers are looking to get a leg up, that's not where it's going to happen, because you're competing with so many other employers, right? So that's really where they can kind of gain better access to students is through more of these particular and specific partnerships.
Gotcha.
Hey, I wonder something too, and I'll work in just a quick line about Goodwill, and Goodwill does skills training. And what we do is we go out into the business community to understand what are the skills, where's the skill gap here, and try to develop programs, usually partnering with community colleges to provide instructors to teach those skills. So the skills may not be the same skills Goodwill is focused on versus the skills that you guys are focused on, but I've got to think you have some robust outreach with the business community. Can you talk about that a little bit and how you cultivate that, and what's the outcome? What are some things that you're finding out that you say, hey, we need to teach this stuff because this is lacking right now out in the business world?
Yeah. So before my position was created, our dean and leadership team went out to our alums. They went out to local employers and said, what's your impression of Bryan School students? When a Bryan School student walks into the interview, what type of student do you think you're getting? And we got a lot of really positive things, like they're academically prepared, they're hard workers, they come from blue collar families, stuff like that. And when it came down to it, the one negative was that they were lacking polish. And that is the whole reason why my position was created, to help with professional development at the undergraduate level. So what we do is we rely heavily upon an organization called the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE. They have 8 competencies that they come up with, and these are essentially the cheat codes, as we tell our students. These are the cheat codes for what employers are looking for, right? So this group is half employers, half higher education professionals. We're using the same 8 competencies to get students to where they need to go and prepare them for that first job out in industry. So to the best that we can, we're kind of casting a broad net, following these 8 competencies, and then encouraging students, if you have the polish, if you can tailor your resume, your cover letter, get the interview, that's when you're going to learn the more specialized things, right? And then that's when you're going to be able to take that and transfer those skills and kind of leapfrog to where you want to go or move up at your company. But yeah, those 8 things, regardless of where you go, regardless of whether you're starting a business, you're going into nonprofit work, for-profit work, those 8 things are going to translate anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put you on the spot to name them, but if you can think of 1 or 2 off the top of your head, that would be great.
Teamwork, leadership, problem solving, communication, technology, diversity. And anyone who's watching is going to be upset if I don't finish the last 2 at the moment, but I'll take 75%. Yeah.
No, that I mean, that's good, because we hear the same thing, that we can teach how to run a forklift, or we can teach how to weld, we can teach, but the people skills, the listening skills, the working well with others, and some of the what I'll call the Boy Scout stuff or Girl Scout stuff is not necessarily taught as kids are growing up. And the same thing with the graduates. And I have worked with a lot of graduates over the years into professional center. And yeah, they're sharp as a tack knowledge wise and technology through the roof. But to put a sentence together, to have the eye contact, the body language, some of that stuff. And I guess that comes with time. But unless somebody tells you, a lot of times you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, and to that point too, again, not to scapegoat COVID, but think about your high school experience, right? Like think all the way back a couple years to when you're in high school, Randy and Teddy.
A couple of years ago.
Back when you were in high school a couple of years ago. You were going to class, you were building relationships with teachers, you were joining student organizations, you were playing sports. A lot of our college going students now had 2-3 years either ripped away from them or vastly changed to the point where sports seasons were canceled, right? You had classes moved online to where instructors at the K-12 level had never taught online before, and they had to figure out how to translate that. And it's been interesting to see how that has played out. Our students, I would say now, are a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of those interpersonal skills because they missed out on that critical period of their time.
Yeah, I'm with you. And to respond to Dale, I played tennis and I did cross country in high school, and I finished every race that I started, and it's none of your business what level I finished it, but I finished them. Hey, and to help Tyler out with those 8 competencies, I think they are career and self-development, communications, critical thinking, equity, inclusion. I think it's leadership, professionalism, teamwork, and technology, according to my quick Google search on the NACE website.
That's it.
There you go.
All right, cool stuff. All right, let's talk about this whole new groups of people. And I don't know, is Gen Z the whole new, or is there another group right there with them? Let's talk about these new generations coming in, these young whippersnappers. And, how are they not only changing business, but how are they changing business schools and the way they operate, Tyler?
Yeah, so believe it or not, we are all the way back around the alphabet to Gen Alpha. So these are the real youngins. These are the ones that are being born now. But in terms of the ones that are going through college, that are stepping out into the workforce, it's Gen Z, right? So as a millennial, you can stop ripping on millennials for us killing whatever industry was your favorite. It's now Gen Z's fault, right? So I'm passing the buck along to Gen Z.
Duly noted.
Yes, please. So with Gen Z, I do a couple of presentations about how they're changing business, and it's hard to encapsulate in such a short amount of time how much they're changing it, right? So one of the big things about generations, and whether or not you buy into generational talk, there are 2 things that are consistent with why generations are defined the way they are. The first thing is the technology available to X generation at that time. The other thing is major life events. All right, so Gen Z lived through 2009. They saw their parents go through 2009, right? As did kind of the tail end of millennials, and they saw the crash. They saw one of the worst economic periods in US history. They saw their parents struggle with money. Flash forward to the future now, they are incredibly aware of money. Whereas millennials are more about work-life balance. If you make money, whatever, it's fine. I'd rather just have my work-life balance. Gen Z doesn't care at all about work-life balance. They are doing side hustles, side gigs, whatever you want to call it. They are cobbling together multiple positions. They're working whatever hour of the day makes sense to them because financial stability is more important to them than anything. What that means on the university side is the traditional 4-year education or the traditional graduate school program is not going to work, right? We need to adapt with them. Otherwise, we are not going to capture this population. What keeps me up at night is that there are so many other ways that students can be successful without a 4-year degree or without a master's degree. When you have a company like Google who is hiring people with high school degrees and saying, you know what, we can just certify them in whatever hard skills we need when they get here and we're good, they can just fast track there. You better be a little worried if you are someone that works at a higher education institution, right? So I have never seen a group that is more ready to tackle their own business, their own side hustle, whatever you want to call it, and to do it independently. No one likes group work. No one likes group work in school. This group especially despises it. Gen Z wants to do everything by themselves because they grew up watching Shark Tank. And I'm generalizing here, but Shark Tank is a very popular show for this group. And they have seen people with high school degrees become entrepreneurs and be successful, right? And this group wants that. So it is vastly changing how we go about the educational process. And that doesn't even factor in ChatGPT and AI and everything that they are super tapped into.
Yeah. I'm with you. I got a few nephews and nieces that are in the Gen Z area age bracket. And one of them I can picture does not have a college degree. He is he did go to firefighting school, so he's a fireman, and been doing that for, I don't know, 8-10 years. And now he's starting his own business mowing grass. And he's on the verge, working nights and weekends. He's on the verge of making more money mowing grass than he is as a fireman. So,
Absolutely.
Lots of ways to achieve your goals.
Well,
hey, Teddy, we're halfway through, by the way. Yep.
I'll get it in a minute. Tyler?
Yeah, so one last thing that I'll add is, Forbes did a survey a couple years ago, and they surveyed anyone who had a side hustle. 17% of Gen Z had a side hustle coming out of high school. 17%. Do you remember what you were doing senior year of high school going into freshman year? I sure wasn't.
Not going to talk about it, Tyler.
That'll be a different webinar entirely. But that shows the trend, right? 17% out of high school. That is a shocking number, right? So that just shows how quickly the landscape's changing.
Well, technology too. I mean, there wasn't the internet, email, all that stuff didn't exist. I mean, Teddy and I were writing on stone tablets with a sharp rock. And now you can get anywhere in the world through the internet and have access to resources and knowledge that our generation, you had to go to the library. And, I'll leave it at that. But Teddy, we're halfway through.
I spent a lot of time at the library, Randy, and I do remember her name. Hey, you're on lunch conversations.
Where you look for a date. Yeah, I hear you.
You're on lunch conversations with Randy and Teddy. And our special guest today is Tyler Wiersma from UNCG, Bryan School of Business and Economics. And the conversation's all about, business schools and how they align with business today and with people today, and how can a business school be beneficial to us as we either start into our career, or, as Tyler alluded to, maybe take our career to another level, halfway or 3/4 of the way through it. So cool. Gen Z, I like the conversation. Every generation makes us think about things a little differently, and a smart society will accommodate where it's appropriate to accommodate. That's my take on that. All right. Go ahead, Randy.
Well, I was going to say, and Tyler, you may want to dodge this one. So if you want to punt, that's fine. But, the recent Supreme Court affirmative action struck down. So, I don't know how you go about your recruiting process and selection process. What are you seeing? I know it's early on, but are you seeing any changes in terms of who's applying, how you go about that process of selection and acceptance and so forth? It's got to be a mess, and trying to pivot on the fly here.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's really early, right? So it just came out. We had our official statement from our undergraduate admissions come out saying that there's going to be no change in how we operate. I think a lot of schools are kind of taking that approach. But one of the things that Teddy and I were talking about yesterday is we've seen two massive institutions come out with new initiatives in the state of North Carolina in response to this. So Duke University, any student in the state of North Carolina coming from a family household of under $120,000 will get free tuition if they are admitted to Duke. And then Chapel Hill followed right up and did the same thing at $80,000 for any in-state students who are able to be admitted to the school. So and UNC Chapel Hill was a school that was at the heart of all of this stuff that was going on, and that was their immediate response to it, right? So I think you see a couple of institutions going about it different ways. And I think everyone right now is just trying to figure it out, because, as I mentioned earlier, we're all battling for a smaller amount of students in the United States. So you throw this into the mix, and it makes it even that much harder.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out what was the barrier for me to take advantage of these opportunities, Randy. And my biggest barrier isn't how much money I do or do not make. My biggest barrier is there's not a chance in the world Duke or Chapel Hill is going to let me in. But those are big changes in higher education. Sure. Schools have to adjust to be able to do three things, is my thought. I'm going to hand off to you once I say my three things, Tyler. The three things they have to do is, one is survive, exist. Second is to serve the students and serve all of the students the best of their ability. And third is to have an impact on our society. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the, what other changes do you see going on, whether it's in the UNC system or in higher ed only, or broadly, what's going on in the current state of higher ed?
Higher ed's a weird place, right? It's a public good, but you got to pay a lot to go here.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to navigate, because when you're bringing your students here, you're hoping that, call me old-fashioned, my hope is that for the greater good, you're bringing students into college to become better citizens, become better people, and then yes, ultimately better professionals in whichever field they go to.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, though, your university is not going to survive unless you have students here, unless you have a good flow of students, and not just admitting the students, but retaining them here, right? Because
Sure.
One thing our students are doing a lot more now is, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's so much easier to transfer. So you'll see a lot of students going through 1 year and either they transfer or they drop out. So one of the things that we're seeing in higher education is that increase in transfers and that focus on transfers. But two, given this cliff that I keep mentioning that we're coming up on, a lot of universities are lowering their enrollment standards. And that's a double-edged sword, because if you lower the enrollment standards, you let in more students, but they may be less equipped to make it through a college education, which means you're not retaining them. So when schools are coming up with these big projects and big plans, and they're using enrollment numbers to forecast how much they can spend on things, that is under the assumption that students will retain at a certain percentage.
Yeah.
You can let more students on the front end and you can make projections, but if they don't retain at the same rate, you're going to be in some trouble down the road. And I think we've seen that with a lot of institutions. And I think the third thing that I'll touch on, I mentioned this a little bit earlier in terms of employers. State funding is interesting in every state. North Carolina is no exception. They're trying to figure out, how does the funding model work? Do you starve the weak? Do you give it to each institution, let them decide how to go about funding the individual units? I think you're going to see a lot more corporate partnerships, and universities will need to survive, because as that state dollar number keeps shrinking, you have to make up for it somewhere else, right? And a lot of schools are committed to freezing their tuition at whatever number it is, because you don't want sticker shock, right? But at the same time, if you're getting less state funding, you got to make up that number elsewhere. So I think you'll see a lot more corporate partnerships happening moving forward.
Yeah.
Also, too, Teddy, and we see this in partnerships here in the local area with, let's say, banks, credit unions, and so forth, partnering with in the high schools with financial literacy and so forth. And so building that, and I'm sure that there may be some contributions to the sky. I don't know, I'm just making that up, but I'm seeing a tie between corporate and the public school system. So there's that. One question did come up, Teddy. Is it okay to work it in about veterans?
Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. So veterans.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on how you approach that demographic and how you market to them?
Yeah, a lot of institutions typically have a military affiliated office that is specifically designed to help not just veterans, but family members of veterans as well. UNCG is no exception to that. We do have a military affiliated services office as well. And really, they are there to help make sure that your hard-earned benefits are going to where you need it to go to. It's a great opportunity for veterans to be able to maximize those benefits, again, that they earned. The one thing that I will throw out there is anyone who's interested on the call in pursuing this, you gotta be careful about what programs you're enrolling in and what you're pursuing, because there are very rigid stipulations behind what you're allowed to enroll in, to the point where you sign up for classes, it will be checked, verified, and there will be pushback potentially if there's a course that doesn't align with your major. So that's one thing when you're approaching these conversations. If you are a veteran looking to enroll at a university, having those really critical conversations with the office early on and figuring out, how's this going to work for me? How easily have the VA benefits gone through in the past? Perfect example is textbooks come in late, usually for veterans, because they have to wait for their VA funds to come in to then pay for the textbooks, and you're potentially 2-3 weeks into the semester before that happens, right? So these are really good conversations to have with the office early on, regardless of what institution you're looking at. But there is actually a list out there. I can't remember the organization that produces it, but there's a military-friendly university list that actually provides rankings take it with a grain of salt, but in general, that's a great place to start to figure out where can I go to where, I will be accepted and it'll be an easy process for me.
Interesting. Yeah. Cause that's a demographic that, again, they, in many cases, straight from high school, and, they enlisted and so now they could be looking at 4-year degree, or maybe they've earned that and looking to continue their education. So real good stuff, Teddy.
Yeah. And Scott wants to know if textbooks are still a thing.
They are. They are still a thing, and they are still expensive.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. So there's a whole story behind why writing a textbook is a fabulous business model. Anyway, lots of changes going on. By the way, talk a little bit about, you and I chatted about this a little bit earlier. So when these schools are making it easier for students to get in to schools that they typically didn't think they could afford to get in, your big competitors are, 75 miles east of you, that has to have an impact when these bigger schools who have bigger pockets and the better ability to make, entry into their schools less expensive. That's got to have a huge impact on, like UNCG and other smaller schools. How are you guys addressing that?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. I won't name names, but I'll use geographical context here. As you mentioned, 75 miles east in the capital, right? We have a flagship institution that's a competitor of ours, and their first year enrollment was up big time this past year. Huge numbers. And one can't help but think how many of those students that wouldn't have made it in there, how many UNCG would have been their second choice, right? Where they ultimately ended up. And then you have one 75 miles south of us that is on a tier above us as well. And they're also letting in more and more students. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Coming from personal experience, as I mentioned, I'm from Ohio. Ohio had an overabundance of higher ed institutions. And in the past 10 years, you've seen consolidations, you've seen closings. And the next 10 years, it's going to get even crazier, right? Perfect example, Kent State and Akron are right down the road from each other. And Akron University was in a lot of trouble. And all the other schools were essentially cannibalizing each other in terms of student enrollment. Akron completely rebranded, cut down their programs, really focused in on what they wanted their niche population to be in terms of the majors and minors that were available to them. I have to think the same thing's going to happen in the state of North Carolina. We're not as tightly condensed as the state of Ohio in terms of institutions pulling from each other, but Greensboro is called the Gate City for a reason. Our students come from anywhere and go anywhere, down 40 and down 85, right? So something will have to change in order to accommodate all these students and figure out how can all these universities still survive.
No crystal ball happening, no proclamation or statement of what I believe will happen in this next segment, but there are 17 UNC schools. Gotta wonder, as things get harder and harder to manage tuition and manage costs and manage attendance, will that 17 number change?
Yeah. And will you see schools combine? Will you see schools close entirely? How will the new funding model work in terms of how UNC school systems are funded? One of the things going on now is we have a few promise schools where if you pay $500 in tuition, that's all you pay. UNC Pembroke is one of them. So you have schools on that end, right? Trying to boost their enrollment by being a promise school in a rural area. And then you have schools like NC State, right, that are the flagship institution that are the other end of the spectrum that are lowering enrollment or admission standards. And then you have everyone else in the middle, right? So it is going to be fascinating for sure.
Yep. Yeah. So, all right. You know what? Here's a big one for you. What is the Bryan School's unique selling proposition? Now, Tyler, you better freaking nail this, man, because you got an audience of 12,000, not including all those on the internet. So tell us, what's the unique selling proposition for Bryan School?
I was at coffee this morning and I did ask the MBA office. I was like, look, I know I'm going to get asked this question. If there were 3 things that I had to say, what would they be? So here they are. The first thing is ROI. There are some very great MBA programs out there with equally hefty price tags.
Yeah.
We are not one of those, right? So you pay, if you're going to the MBA program, for example, you pay $27,000 over the course of 2 years. For certain, I won't name names, but for certain programs, that's half of 1 year, right? And when you come out of that, the hope is that you're landing a well-paying job. And I do what's called first destination data, which is essentially tracking where all of our students go. And I can confirm that the average salary that our students are making is on par with the national average as well. So much lower cost on the front end, equal outcome on the other end of it, right? The second thing, which we already touched on, was just the employer involvement. For being such a large business school, people think UNCG, they think, mid-sized school. Our business school is the same size as LSU, as Alabama. I mean, we have a massive business school. We're over 4,000 students, right? So what's unique about though is how much employers engage with us. We all know how great industry is in Greensboro and the surrounding area. And I think a lot of our students don't necessarily recognize that. But when they step in and they have mock interviews, they have these, these sponsorship opportunities where companies are paying to come to us. You have the capstone projects that Teddy, you're going to follow up with me about. All those things students are getting while they're here. And that's a little bit more tailored and a little bit more like a small school than you would see compared to a bigger school.
Yeah.
The other thing is how well we've pivoted online. Our online MBA is just off to a flying start. We've gotten great feedback from our students. It's easily accessible, it's low cost, and they're seeing the results on the back end. Like I said, within 2 years, we found ourselves in the top rankings for online MBA programs. So being able to have a great education at a low cost that works with your schedule if you're a full-time working employee, and especially one if your company is going to pay for it, hard to beat those.
Yeah, good stuff. And it's in Greensboro.
Yes.
So I'm hoping I'm pronouncing Sahim.
Yes, Sahim.
He says, all true. UNC and the Bryan School truly is a testament of listening to their students and industry changes to create curriculum. So thanks for jumping into that, Sahim. This is good stuff. I mean, you absolutely, you got to go for the whole package. And how does the whole package align with what I need? The courses, the professors, the peers, the businesses that are tied and connected to the school, the community. Throw the cost into it, and how does that align with what I can make happen? So I don't see. I'm with you. I think the unique selling proposition of Bryan School aligns well in lots of ways. So cool. All right, one more big one. So a degree isn't enough anymore. There's a whole lot more that helps us be successful in life and business and career, and as an employee, as an entrepreneur. Talk a little bit more about the rise of credentialing and other alternative forms of learning. And we touched on it a little bit, but talk a little bit more about that in the context of what Bryan School has to offer.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, 10 years ago, if you had an internship, you were set for life. I mean, you got the job you wanted right out of undergrad, and then you could get promoted and yada, yada, yada.
Especially if you went to Mad Men. Oh, wait a minute, that's a movie. Never
mind. and now, one internship might not even be enough. We see a lot of our students going after two. So, whether it's in your internship and you're getting professional development there, or whether you're going through an undergraduate or graduate program, the wealth of resources online is just absolutely insane. Whether it's something like Coursera, where you can enroll in kind of online credentialing courses, LinkedIn Learning is phenomenal. Anyone interested in furthering their professional development. I know LinkedIn Premium is not cheap, but I would really think about investing in yourself. LinkedIn Learning has thousands and thousands and thousands of incredibly digestible, work at your own pace, upskilling opportunities. And that's a huge one there too. But certifications, as you mentioned, that seems to be the one that's really popping up lately. And whether it's a certification embedded in your curriculum, or whether it's a certification that your employer is paying for, or whether you're going out of your way to get it, whenever you go on LinkedIn and you see all the letters after people's names in the LinkedIn title, all those certifications they've gained, those are differentiators. That's one of the things I talk about most with our students is, so many people have a similar experience to you. So many people look similar on a resume. What do you do that's different? And having just one certification in addition to your MBA is going to set you apart from the rest of the population. So the opportunities are endless. The cost is low, and in some cases it's free, right? It's all about where you source it from.
Two things. Three things. Number one, if you you can often get LinkedIn Learning free through your library.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, if you pay for LinkedIn Learning by itself, it's only about $20 a month, $240 a year to keep learning. And what a lot of people do, which is a big failure, is they pay for it and they never do it, or they do one course and they forget to do more. And the third thing is, Tyler, Randy and I both have done career coaching. Randy still does it. Business owners, recruiters, talent acquisition professionals are excited about talking to someone who can fit their need, who continuously learns. You can't stop. So, Lisa had a question. How about engaging with alumni? Can you talk a little bit about alumni services in a broad sense from either UNCG and or the Bryan School?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll use UNCG kind of as the first example, specifically within the Bryan School. I heard a fascinating stat a couple of years ago, and it was 80% of our alum are within 5 miles north or south of I-40. 80% are within 5 miles north or south of I-40, which means our students live here, they come here, and they stay here, which is really cool.
That's called stickiness, ain't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah, stickiness.
Yeah.
So what's neat about that is because so many are local, it gives us a better chance to engage them. So whether it's wanting to give back in terms of money, wanting to give back in terms of time and talent, we have alum do mock interviews to help our graduate and our undergraduate students prepare for interviews. We have alums who also are kind of putting on their company hat, and they're coming as recruiters essentially to some of these events that are being sponsored. We have the capstone projects that I mentioned. We have fun events like the basketball game. Basketball is huge at UNC Greensboro, so we invite them to our Spartan spot. So we're trying to do anything and everything to get them to re-engage once they have left, because the opportunities and the experiences that they can bring back to our students are something, again, kind of that thing that should show up on your tuition bill that doesn't, right? It's that network you're able to gain. So I know we're really looking at trying to roll out some formal mentorship programs here in the next year or two. So that's another area that we, in addition to other business schools, are trying to engage their alumni with the current students.
Yeah, I know. And of course, Tyler, you and I have talked. You went to school in Ohio, and so did I, and went to Marietta College in Marietta, Ohio.
Different decades, but go ahead.
At least multiple different decades, probably. Where I'm going with this is, as an alum, I helped informally in what I'll call the recruiting process. It's one thing to have your admissions office chirping in their ear and telling what a great school it is and all the value propositions. They expect that. So do the parents. But when they can hear it from an alum, somebody who's been there, done it, and now is out in the workplace and can cut through the BS and just say, hey, here's the real deal. I don't know what the numbers were in terms of those who actually enrolled and were admitted, but the feedback I got was the kind of work that represented was huge, credibility wise. And so leveraging, say you've got all these guys in your backyard, and leveraging those connections with prospective students could turn things your way versus maybe them going elsewhere for education. Really
Absolutely.
Good. Yeah.
And another interesting project that's been going on for the last few years, Greater Winston-Salem is doing a project. Can't remember the exact name of it. And they're doing a similar project that I, over the last year or so, heard of at Greensboro, where they're trying to figure out ways to capture these students that go to our schools in across North Carolina and get them to stay. There's I can't remember the exact term, and so in part, one of the things that's helping make that happen is all of the big corporations that are coming into town and playing with big stuff like airplanes and batteries and stuff like that. So and so for me, watching it happen and from the edges in whatever my role is, it's pretty fun to see. So
yeah.
Randy, any questions? Anything else come up?
No, I mean, I could throw in a couple just to comment things, but I wanted to work in real quick. CNBC just came out with the results, and for the second year in a row, North Carolina has been ranked as the top state for business. And you run the business school part over there. So hats off to you and the rest of you guys that are cranking out the students and making this business community and atmosphere what it is today. So, that didn't happen by accident. A lot of hard work. Yeah.
You want to, Dale asked about DBAs, Doctorate of Business Administration. Do you guys have that program?
So that is something that's a little bit rare. I would say a lot rarer than MBAs. I'm gonna give my personal take on it because I do feel pretty strongly about this. Doctorates are great if you're going to be a faculty member, if you're going into academia. I don't know if it's going to provide as much value to you compared to a second master's. So that would be something to consider is, when you're looking at furthering your career, you would think bachelor's, master's, doctorate. That makes a lot of sense. And in a lot of cases it does, but maybe consider what's another master's degree I could potentially tack on and pursue that instead. So I would encourage that as well.
Dale, Scott, I think it's Doctorate of Business Administration. And I'm with Tyler. I think that if you have this area of specialty and you create another area of specialty and get your master's in that space, then it can have, an amplified impact for you. So, but then again, I guess it's all about where you're going to go play.
Yeah.
Does it make more sense to have this type of, degree and in that area versus a different degree in another area? So good.
I know we don't have much time left, Teddy. I think we kind of exhausted what's in the chat area. But just a real quick thing, for many families, particularly ones that it may be the first time that one of them attend college, the whole application process, oh my goodness, it's going to cost an arm and a leg. I can't afford it. I'm confused by it. Do you have a department at your place that can hold hands here and guide people and allay some of those concerns about cost and all of the forms to fill out? It just seems so daunting to some people. How can you help ease that transition a little bit?
Yeah. So depending on where you're coming from, every institution is going to have their admissions office, right? They're primarily going to deal with undergraduate programs. If the school has graduate programs, they have a graduate college who helps with that. And then specifically within the program that you want to go to, they usually have at least one person devoted to that as well. It is overwhelming. 50% of our first year students at UNCG the past couple of years have been first gen. 50%, literally half of them coming in. That is a huge learning curve, right? And you don't necessarily have someone there to help, right? But if you are interested, yes, the university has it. It's just a matter of how many people they have and the resources that they have.
Cool.
Yeah, that's good because learning, you get a big drop off that first year if they're not accustomed to learning how to manage their time and to say no because it's so easy. Yeah, I'll go out. I'll do this. I'll do that. And more at the undergrad level. I've got to think at the graduate level. You're playing for real, and you're not going to skip classes and all that crazy stuff that Teddy used to do.
We can't talk about it, Randy.
I used to hate 8 o'clock classes, man. I got out in 4 years. I got my degree, right? So I'm done. But I knew a lot of guys that just flushed out because they just didn't take it seriously.
I get it.
Yeah, man.
Tyler, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. There's a whole lot more we could talk about. We had this huge list of things we wanted to share with the audience, and there's only so many hours in the day. So thank you very much for showing up. I'll share the website for our UNCG. I'll share the link, your LinkedIn profile for people to follow you on there. And there's one thing that we want to make sure the audience got from our conversation with you. What is that one thing?
The opportunity to further your education is easier than you think.
Good. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I knew you had some phenomenal ending statement. Cool stuff. Hey, next week, our special guest is Mark Owens. Mark Owens is I think he's the president. I'm going to make sure I don't get myself
President and CEO. Yep. President, CEO, Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. He'll be back for a third time.
Yeah.
Tyler, we bring him back about once a year to give us latest and greatest on what's happening here in Winston and overall in the Triad. Again, this CNBC survey or whatever they call it, North Carolina's top of the heap, second year in a row. So that's a good thing. We'll also talk some challenges that our area is facing and how we stack up with cities of similar size. So we'll get that from Mark Owens. And also Catherine Perry, Executive Director with Leadership Winston, is going to be on, Teddy, taking your spot as a co-host. Am I?
Yeah, I begged Catherine to do it. It took some browbeating to get her to want to hang out with Randy for an hour, but she said she would.
What did it cost you? Yeah.
So anyway, Tyler, thanks a lot for being on
thanks,
here.
Tyler.
Randy, good seeing you. And to our audience, thank you very much for attending. We love having you here. And we look forward to saying hi to you again next week. Everybody, take care. Bye.
Have a good one. See you now.